So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, our apologies for starting a few minutes late. With me today is Professor Defino. She's an adjunct professor at McGeorge. She's also a graduate of McGeorge. I forgot to put that on the slide. And she's the president and founder of Earth Advocacy. Thank you very much, Professor Defino, for being with us today.
Of course.
So I know you're very busy. We're just talking about this. You obviously actively practice in this field. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and about your current work?
Sure. So my background is a graduate of UC Davis many years ago, and graduated with an poli-sci public service environmental policy. So I've always wanted to work in the environmental policy field. I then went to McGeorge, graduated in '93. Really enjoyed my experience at McGeorge. Took all the environmental law classes I possibly could, and I did internships while I was there. I then, at that point, actually moved to DC, and at that moment, I thought I wanted to do environmental litigation. So I actually went and worked for a small public interest law firm called Meyer & Glitzenstein, and I did almost 3 years of environmental litigation representing nonprofit organizations. Realized that while I really loved the issues that I was working on, I really enjoyed the policy side of it more than the practice of writing summary judgment motions and digging through 20 boxes of administrative record. And so I enjoyed much more like developing the policy rather than litigating things sort of on the back end. So I actually changed my focus and went to work for, at the time, called U.S. Public Interest Research Group as their conservation advocate in DC. And that's when I started my policy work. Since then, I came back to California. I was the state director for Defenders of Wildlife for almost 20 years. And then on the cusp of COVID, not anticipating COVID, I left Defenders and started my own firm called Earth Advocacy. So now I'm a one-person show. I because of my experience, and we can talk about this a little bit later when we talk about what people can be doing, I wear many hats. So I work on policy. I do develop things that eventually go to litigation. I work on strategy. I work on communications. I do organizing. I work with many different organizations. My clients range from Defenders of Wildlife to Audubon, to land trusts, to foundations, Nature Conservancy, NRDC. I do a lot of work in a lot of different issue areas. So my experience over the years is quite broad. Federal public lands issues, energy, water, wildlife, land use planning. Trying to think what else. I'm looking at my board. Forestry. So I work at federal and state level, mostly on the state level, but do go over into the federal side at times as well. So quite a broad range.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So you mentioned a little bit about that, but what are the different positions that one can do in this field?
So in the environment and water field, and I would just say, unfortunately, because of climate change and all of the impacts that we're experiencing, this is a big and growing field. I think particularly in the world of energy and water, I think you're going to see more and more need of people. And there's a lot of things that people can do with a legal or policy background. In the private setting, you can go work for a consulting firm and work on a variety, help develop and move projects along. I know people that have moved in and are working with like energy companies and working in their permitting shop, helping develop projects and move them along. In the legislative realm, you can go and work for a member, either in the state capitol or in the US Capitol. You can work for policy committees. So like in my world, the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee on the assembly side, these are people that don't necessarily have a law background. They have policy background and they need to understand the policy because they are writing the laws. You can also be a technician and go work in the legal legislative counsel's office. You could go work for the legislative analyst's office. There's and then you can work in state government. There's people that are working at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, at the California Air Resources Board. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities and positions out there doing a variety of different things: permitting, project development, planning, community outreach. There's quite a wide range of opportunities. And then, in the space I work in the nonprofit world, you can work for a nonprofit organization, you can work for a foundation. Having a law and policy background is really, I think, essential to understand and make progress on the big issues that we're tackling. So there's a wide range of issues that are out there that people can work on and roles that they can play. Yeah.
Thank you. So what are the skills do you think that are needed to be successful in these positions?
So I think, obviously understanding the laws that are out there, the policies and laws that are out there. Like, if you're working in the water field, you could spend your entire life just trying to understand water laws, water policy. There's water supply, there's water quality. So there's, you need to have a basic understanding of, what are the rules of the game, and what are the policies that the rules are trying to promote. That's also very important to understand. We're trying to advance certain policies like water conservation. What are the policies around that? Endangered species conservation, land use planning. It's important to understand all of that. I think having good writing skills and communication skills are very important. The ability to work with others, teamwork, the ability to work with others, to be able to manage projects. So not just working with people, managing issues and projects, having an understanding of strategy. Like in my world, understanding strategy, understanding like how processes work. So it's not just like the policies, but the processes themselves, the legislative process. Obviously it's important to understand that if you're working in that world. Understanding processes at agencies. What does it take to move a project through a permitting, federal state permitting? Those are all important skills to understand. So those are just to name a few.
So let's talk a little bit about the class that you teach for the program, the environmental law. So how do the skills and knowledge that you teach in that class, how do you think it helps someone either jumpstart a career or grow in this particular field?
Yeah, so the class that I teach focuses on federal law because we only have a certain number of days that, and hours that we can focus. And so we focus on the federal side. And so we do a survey of some of the biggest environmental laws that are out there. And we look at it from the perspective of like, why do we have this? Why was this law written? How has this law been interpreted? How has this law evolved over time? And where are we at now with the law? And we look at cases and we understand sort of the trajectory of the law. And a lot of times we look at regulations, which is basically the agency's interpretations of the law. And so we cover the Superfund law, which is the CERCLA, Comprehensive Environmental Responsibilities Liability Act. And this is basically the law around when you have hazardous waste in the environment, how are you cleaning these things up at the end of the day? We look at the Clean Water Act, we look at the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act, we look at not just air pollution, but we're looking at climate change. And in fact, the threat of climate change runs through a lot of the different units because climate change is having impacts and reverberates through a lot of the work that we're doing. But in the clean air, we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions. How has the Clean Air Act evolved to tackle that issue? A lot of times it's looking at the back and forth with various administrations, how these rules have changed based on the political policies of the administration that is in charge of the rules at that particular point in time. We look at the Endangered Species Act, and we look at judicial review, citizen suits. So we understand sort of the whole landscape and try to so that people, when they get done with taking the class, they have a better understanding of the why and the how and of the what. And that can really, I think that's really important, particularly when you work in a space, to sort of understand that as you're moving forward, as you're interpreting these laws, as you are trying to change the laws. And we actually have some practical components. So this year we did where I gave the students regulations that were being proposed. And I said, write a comment letter. Pretend you're a constituent or you're representing an entity and you're commenting on the proposal. And, do you support it? Do you have changes? If you have changes, what would those changes be? And write a letter like you were participating in the regular rulemaking process. We also had team efforts where the students got together as teams and tackled climate change and said, okay, well, what would be how would we look at how to address greenhouse gas emissions, and what would be the sectors we would be focusing on? And, do we do it through efficiency? Do we do it through large scale utility? Do we do it through nuclear? And why? And what would be the implications of that? And what would the various stakeholders think about that? So there's, and then we have back and forth with the students themselves. We have discussion threads. We pose questions, and the students are, answer the questions and respond to each other. And we have a back and forth around it, which I really enjoy those, because it helps me, there's people have different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. And a lot of times I get feedback in those discussion threads that I think are really interesting. I didn't think about that way, but that's a really interesting way of putting it. So my sense is at the end of the day, when the students are done with the course, they have a deeper understanding of federal environmental law and what is in it, what does it mean. And I think, and I've had students that practice in the environmental field that have taken the class and said, this was really helpful. I understood this one part. I work in water, but now I understand these other pieces and how it fits together, and found it very helpful with the work that I'm doing.
And how does the federal laws apply to state law? I mean, I know the word the skills and knowledge that you teach in the class, how can it be transposed for folks who are working at a more state level or county level or city level?
Well, federal laws apply to so for example, say I'm a solar project and I want to put my project I don't know, in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. So I'm proposing this project. I'm going to have to comply with local land use laws. So I'll have to get a permit from the county, which will then require me to comply with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. But say my project is going to result in the fill of some wetlands. That immediately triggers the federal laws. So we have federal laws that apply to everyone. So if you trigger it, then you have to comply with it. So now I have to get a Clean Water Act permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. And I have to go to get a Port of Cologne permit from the state board. And maybe there's vernal pools there that have federally protected species. Now I need to go comply with the Federal Endangered Species Act. And I have to comply with the State Endangered Species Act. So federal laws apply whether you're developing a project. They apply because there are uses, there are public trust values that we have identified at a national level that are important to protect: air, water, wildlife, and those laws now apply to everyone that might be having a negative impact to those.
Thank you. So looking back, what do you wish you knew when you started your career?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess, what I would say is, and I don't know if this is something I actually would be able to learn but having gone through the learning process itself.
Mhm.
But maybe having a better understanding of the breadth of the lay of the land. So when I first started, I was very focused on federal law, and I didn't really think that much about the state side and sort of, I think I would have liked to have had a deeper understanding of the various layers. And I think I also maybe didn't have enough of an appreciation of the importance of making policy at a state level. You know, at the time I thought, oh, well, everything happens in Washington, D.C., which I was very wrong about. But again, I didn't, you know, I think that perspective, I wish that when I was younger, I had better perspective, but I think the problem is perspective only happens with age. So I'm not sure it's something that can be easily fixed.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Defino. If you don't mind like sticking for just a few more minutes, I'm gonna quickly go through the presentation because I know we started a little later, and then open it up for questions. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. So here I just listed some selected alumni, you know, who are working in this field, just to show there's very much a variety of different type of careers that you can do. So we refer, so obviously we're talking about our Master of Science in Law in Water and Environmental Law. It is a program that is fully online. We teach it in an asynchronous manner. Yet it's still very interactive, as Professor Defino mentioned, like the discussion chat, all the different type of assignments that students have to comment on and get involved with. We've taught this program for the last 10 plus years, and this for those of you who don't know McGeorge, we're part of University of the Pacific, and our law school, McGeorge School of Law, has been teaching lawyers water and environmental law for many, many years. We actually have quite a good ranking amongst all US law schools in this particular field. And so this MSL program certainly builds upon the foundation of this water and environmental law JD program. The MSL degree requires 26 units. Most students do it over 2 or 3 years, taking 1 or 2 classes a semester. There are a set number of required courses, but then there are electives because, as we just discussed, there's many different paths that one could take. And so we want to give an option for those who are in the water and environmental law to be able to learn, obviously, the knowledge, the water law, environmental law, water and justice, you know, all the different aspect of this field. But yet we also want to give enough electives for those of you who are interested in perhaps going into lobbying. Perhaps you want to lobby on behalf of a foundation, a nonprofit, or certainly, or sorry, I'm stumbling on my words, or simply working for a lobbying firm. We have negotiation and settlements. Like, we have a number of courses that really could apply to many professions, and we want to give our students the flexibility to choose certain electives. Now, we've talked a little bit about this. What makes our online program distinctive is, so all of our lectures are asynchronous. That gives you the flexibility to do the work at a time that is convenient for you, but yet we still have weekly deadline because we want to have an interactive classroom feel online in Canvas. We have a lot of ungraded quizzes, chat, just to help promote learning and that collegial online learning community. And our professors are very engaged with our students. They hold, in addition of responding on a weekly basis to comments from students, they host office hours, optional synchronous sessions at time. And as Professor Defino mentioned, like, we put a strong emphasis in all of our classes to teach practical, real world assignments. So next step, for those of you who are interested, we're right now accepting application for this fall. The deadline is July 31st and class starts August 14. I encourage you to connect with us if you have any questions. My colleagues and I, like in our department, we very much enjoy meeting with prospective applicants and helping you get your best application possible, ready for the graduate admissions committee to review it. We're working all summer long, so So you should hear once you submit a complete application fairly quickly. We also have a number of limited scholarship that we offer to our admitted students. So that said, let's open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to stop. Let me see if I can open this here. On your end, you should see a Q&A box. I encourage you to open this and to type your questions there, and we will answer them as they come in. Don't be shy.
Yeah, all questions are good questions. Oh, here we go.
What are the chances for engineers participating in the MSL program to pursue a JD program later? So I would say the career outcomes can be quite different whether you do a JD or an MSL. So if your goal is to represent clients, only a JD can give you that opportunity. With a JD, you're then eligible to take the bar exam. Our MSL degree do not prep you for the bar exam. So if you wanted to, after the MSL, to do a JD program, you certainly could. And we actually have students, not often, but every few years we have students that do that after the MSL. They decide a year or two later to do the JD program. But for that, you have to do the normal JD application process. You have to follow the normal JD application process, meaning you have to take the LSAT exam, and depending on your score, you have more or less chance of getting admitted or a scholarship opportunity at different schools. So there is not a pathway MSL to JD. I am always when I see a question like that, when I read a question like that, it makes me think that you're thinking about perhaps representing clients. So I would love to have a one-on-one conversation with you, if you're comfortable with that, to talk a little bit more about this, because there is really no point in doing an MSL program prior to a JD degree. In certain cases, it can help your JD application, but for the most part, it really won't have much impact. So even though I never want to discourage anyone to do an MSL program, I think it's worth having an in-depth conversation about this. Professor Delfino, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think it really depends on what you're looking for in your career. If you are looking to actually practice law, I think that it is very important. Obviously, you have to get a JD and be admitted to a bar, whether it's in California or another state or in DC. But you don't necessarily, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to actually practice law, litigate, represent clients as a lawyer in a legal setting, then yes, you definitely need to get a JD. But there are many other places where knowledge of the law and application of the law, you don't necessarily need to have a JD to be able to do that.
Yeah. Let me go back to the
We've got a couple
we
of
actually
questions.
had water resources engineer in the program a few years ago, and she's still there, and she was able to progress in her career. So next question, what majors of undergraduates specifically required to apply for? So we don't have, I'm taking the question, are there any specific majors that we require for the to apply for the MSL program? And we don't have any. As Professor Delfino will likely say, like, our students all have very, very different background. So I don't think there's one that is better than another. And we say the same for students who go to the general like JD program. There are no majors that prep you for a law study, a law program. So because the MSL program is a law program. So and
yeah, in fact,
go ahead.
I would say sometimes my experience is like folks that have the science background, because a lot of people would think, oh, I need to have a liberal arts background in order to apply to law school. Honestly, some of the best lawyers I've ever met came out of the sciences because they have really honed their ability to critically think and analyze, which I think are really important skills. So I would 100% agree that there is no specific major that somehow is better than another to apply for either MSL or JD.
Is this program only online? Our Water and Environmental Law is made for one to take all 26 credit online. Now, if you are local to Sacramento and you want to take some of the classes in person, we do offer some of those classes in person. A good portion of the classes are still going to be online, but you would be able to take, for example, electives in person on our campus. We do offer evening classes, so to make it more convenient for our students who are working full-time. What other questions do you have? Professor Delfino, I'm going to let you.
No, it's not critical. I mean, it's like I said, it's good to understand the science part of environmental law because it is very much rooted in science. And sometimes I joke around that I play a scientist on TV because you know, having an understanding of ecology and science is helpful. I don't think it's critical, but yeah, I don't think it's a critical thing to do. You will pick up on it though.
Next question. What is the difference between an MSL and an LLM program? So the MSL program is for people who have zero legal background and legal knowledge. The LLM, the Master of Laws, it's for people who have already a prior legal knowledge. So it's for people who have graduated from a JD program or from a foreign or an equivalent of a JD program. You need 24 credits for the LLM program and 26 for the MSL. And so the differences really concretely between those two is in the LLM, we don't teach you again legal analysis and legal writing because we assume you have acquired that knowledge with your prior law degree. In the MSL, we do teach you those skills prior to you advancing to those more substantive law courses. Now, a lawyer or a JD graduate could certainly do an MSL degree, but most would choose the LLM. So in our case, in this particular field of water and environmental law, you have the options to either do the MSL or the LLM. And if you have a JD degree, or if you're an attorney, the LLM is likely a better fit for you, so you don't have to retake those classes, those legal analysis, legal writing classes. Could you give a few examples of the guided research electives? So we have the directed research class. I think this is what you're referring to. And directed research is the equivalent of a capstone class where you work one-on-one with a faculty on a particular project or research project often. Often students do that because they have a particular interest in a specific topic because of their work. It is you work with a faculty, you develop a timeline with a faculty for when you need to have your research done. It often ends our directed research into a paper, or sometimes it's a bibliography, but more often it's a paper recapping all the different, perhaps laws that exist on a particular topics and the litigation or the evolution of that law. Like it really, this is when you fine-tune this directly with a professor. You have the options to also be able to do a master thesis. This is the same as a directed research where you work one-on-one with a faculty, but the end product needs to be of publishable quality, and it needs to be, and you need to add something to the literature in this particular field. So it does require significant investment of time. And I have to tell you that by experience, not everyone has the discipline to be able to do a master thesis. Because even though you enroll in the master thesis for only one semester, it will take you more than one semester to do the work. Professor Delfino, have you done either of those classes?
I have not. I have had a husband who has done that, and yes, it took him longer than a semester.
All of our lectures are video recorded with captions. We don't have synchronous live lectures, with the exception that every once in a while, a professor will say there is an optional, so again, it's optional, synchronous lectures, and we always have the transcription option, the live transcriptions option available. And if the students are interested in that optional live class and it's not possible for them to attend, then we can close caption it afterwards. What other questions do you guys have? I'm going to go back to my slide with my our two email addresses. graduatelaw@pacific.edu is our department email address. Kucera@pacific.edu is my direct email address. I very much encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in the MSL program or the LLM program. We can talk about this and see if the program is a good fit for you. And I'm happy to work with you on your application. One last question. With the employer looking for a student who has a great GPA after regret and looking for I'm not too sure to fully understand the question. Is the question does a GPA matters to future employers? So Professor Delfino, when in your prior positions, when you were hiring, did you look at GPA or did you look at the degree and the knowledge that they've acquired?
So for your first job out of school, generally employers will ask for a transcript in addition to understanding the knowledge base and other attributes. If you're someone who has already been in the job field and you're taking this class to add to your knowledge base, it's less likely that GPA is something that people are going to ask about. They're more like, have you completed it? Did you successfully complete it? So my experience is more like if you're just straight up coming right out of college, or this is your first job, generally employers will ask for a transcript and they'll look at the GPA. But certainly as you get older, your GPA becomes less and less relevant, and it's more about your experience and how well you've done in previous jobs.
And your networking, it's a small community.
And your networking is very important. Yes, especially in the environmental field. I find that it's not as big of a field as you would think, especially the longer you're in it.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's webinar. I'm sorry again that we started a few minutes late. Thank you, Professor Delfino, for taking some of your time to be with us. And once again, please do reach out to me. You can send me an email, and then we can connect at a time that works for you, so we can talk a little bit more about your career goals and how could this program be helpful to you. So have a wonderful afternoon, everyone, and I hope to hear from many of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.